The first pro, and arguably the biggest one of living in Midtown, is its proximity to so many big businesses in the city. Companies like Google, Wells Fargo, Microsoft, Georgia Tech, and Emory Midtown Hospital are all there in Midtown. This obviously provides a lot of jobs, and so you have a lot of employment opportunities there in Midtown. If you lived in this area and worked in this area, you could literally walk to work. That's how close all of these things are. In addition to that, being in the middle of Atlanta, this also means that you're super close to so many other things that are just outside of Midtown. For example, the airport is about 15-20 minutes south of Midtown. You also have the northern suburbs that are about 20 to 30 minutes north. Other cities like Decatur are about 5 to 10 minutes east of Midtown. And Buckhead is just north of Midtown, about a 5-minute drive. What's up, y'all? My name is Victor with Atlanta Suburban Living, and we put out videos every week about what it's like to live in Atlanta and the suburbs around Atlanta. The next pro of living in Midtown is the amount of parks and green space. And this is absolutely something that you don't really think of when you think of a major US city like New York or Miami or LA. You don't think of having this many parks as we do here in Atlanta and in Midtown. In fact, one of the biggest parks in all of Atlanta is Piedmont Park, and it's right there in Midtown or just outside of Midtown. And so you could easily walk to Piedmont Park if you lived in Atlanta. There is a bunch of green space there in Piedmont Park. There's also the Atlanta Botanical Gardens there. There are a couple restaurants there in Piedmont Park. And so it's definitely one of the biggest draws to living in that area. Another pro of living in Midtown is that it's so close to Interstates 20 and 75 and 85. And if you plan on moving to Midtown, or you just have any questions about what it's like to live there, feel free to call, text, or email me anytime. Thank you so much to everybody who has reached out. I'm always happy to help with your moving needs to the Atlanta area. But being so close to 20 and 75 and 85 means that you can easily get around not only the city of Atlanta, but this also means that you could get outside of Atlanta very easily. You could get all around the state very easily because Midtown is so close to the interstate system. Some other major interstates for the city of Atlanta would be like Interstate 285, also Highway 400. And so these are like the major interstate roads, and it would be very easy to access all of these roads if you lived in Midtown. Another big draw for many people who live here is the fact that Midtown is kind of like the art district for Atlanta. There are lots of art museums here, and in general, you can really see that that influence of the arts here in Midtown. Museums like the High Museum of Art, the Woodruff Art Center, and the Museum of Design Atlanta are all here in Midtown, and the High Museum is, in my opinion, like the best one or the most popular one. This is, I believe, the largest art museum as well in Midtown. So if you're looking for an art museum to visit and you can only visit one, that's the one that I would definitely recommend. And then it is kind of along the lines of art, but the Fox Theater is also in the very southern part of Midtown as well. The Fox Theater is where we have like Broadway shows. When they come to Atlanta, they play there at the Fox. And again, this is a very short walk from the middle of Midtown down to the Fox Theater. So another big benefit of living there. And then another pro of living in Midtown is the amount of restaurant options that you have here in this part of the city. Colony Square is right in the middle of Midtown. This is like a giant food court area with a bunch of super popular restaurants. There are definitely a lot of great options for restaurants here, but my absolute favorite for restaurants when it comes to Midtown is the Chick-fil-A that's right there in Colony Square. Just kidding, sort of. Not my favorite, but it definitely is one of the most popular ones in the whole state of Georgia. So there are definitely a lot of great aspects of living in Midtown. You get all of those amenities, all of those businesses, employers, the shops, the restaurants, the art, all right there within walking distance. And so living in Midtown is definitely very popular. A lot of people want to live there. In fact, it is one of the highest in demand areas in all of Midtown, but there are definitely some red flags to living in Midtown. And so let's talk about what those red flags are, because if you're thinking about moving to Midtown, you definitely need to have the whole picture. I want to make sure that when we make these videos, we're not just talking about the highlights of an area, but we're also giving you the pros and the cons so that you can decide for yourself which areas are the best for you. And one of those cons of living in Midtown is going to be the cost of living or the price of homes. Arguably speaking, Midtown has the highest average home price in all of Metro Atlanta, even compared to Buckhead, which is often thought of as the wealthiest part of Atlanta. According to the local MLS, the cost of homes in Midtown averages even higher than Buckhead. So you're really looking at some very high priced homes. Obviously, to live this close to all of these different amenities, you're going to have to pay for that. So certainly going to be a high price with living in Midtown. And then because it's in the center of the city, this is also going to be the noisiest part of Atlanta. And I know you're thinking, well, isn't all of Atlanta very noisy? And not necessarily. There are parts of Buckhead or Brookhaven that are not as noisy as Midtown. Virginia Highlands is a mostly residential area. You know, there are plenty of residential areas that are in the city of Atlanta, but Midtown is not predominantly residential. So if you lived in Midtown, you're definitely going to be dealing with a lot of city noise that comes with living in the center of Atlanta. And then I know we talk a lot about the traffic in Atlanta, but to live in Midtown would be to live in the middle of all of that traffic. Not only is the majority of the Atlanta traffic on the interstate system, but it is like most dense at 75, 85 in Midtown. So this is where all of the traffic is. This is where, like, if you lived in Midtown and you tried to access the interstate system, you might as well be just thinking you're going to go get into the traffic. And traffic in Atlanta is not really like rush hour traffic is where the worst part of it is. It's like all the time. That area of 75, 85 in Midtown and around Midtown always has bumper to bumper traffic. I mean, it is the worst right there. So to live in Midtown, you'd have to deal with that traffic all the time. And then obviously because of all of these amenities, the shops, the restaurant, the art, this is also one of the biggest tourist areas for Atlanta. So it is very crowded in this part of town. So if you want to live super close to all of these things, you're going to also have to kind of fight the crowds there as well. And then another con of living in Midtown is the public transportation system. It is used a lot in Atlanta and it's called MARTA. And MARTA has the trains and the buses. But MARTA is not really my favorite. I don't prefer to use MARTA when I go to Atlanta, but then again, I don't live in the city. I live in one of the suburbs, so it kind of depends on your situation. Obviously, if you don't want to own a vehicle, you certainly could use the public transportation, but like compared to other cities, especially if you're coming from another country, like a European country where the public transportation is amazing, the public transportation in Atlanta is nothing compared to the public transportation in some of the European countries. So MARTA definitely has a lot of improvement to do. There are definitely some other great neighborhoods in Atlanta. If you are thinking, well, Midtown might not be for me, then my favorite neighborhood in all of Atlanta is Buckhead. And I actually made an entire video about what it's like to live in Buckhead. You can check it out right here. I'll see you in the next video.